Hey guys! Today we'll be recapping a manhwa called The Kind Older Sister Is No More. Please remember to like and subscribe if you enjoy the video, as it really helps our channel grow. Thanks. This story follows a young girl named Irene, whose fiancé is stolen by her own sister. At first, they were just spending time together, but then he started visiting her in secret. Even the servants knew about their affair, but they didn't do anything to stop it. This isn't the first time our protagonist's younger sister has stolen the spotlight. Both girls were born on the same day, only 1 year apart. The younger sister, whose name is Liel, was very weak as a child, so everything was adjusted to suit her needs. Irene ended up being neglected. On their shared birthday, her parents paid attention to Liel and completely ignored their eldest child. What kind of parents would be so cruel? But it was mostly Liel's fault, since she knew how to manipulate them. Even at a young age, she pretended to collapse, abruptly ending the birthday celebrations before anyone could remember Irene. Liel is truly evil. Things went on like that for years. 6 years later, Irene finally entered the Royal Academy a year late because she was so busy taking care of her younger sister. For the first time, she made friends of her own. But that joy was short-lived. As soon as Liel found out about them, they stopped hanging out with Irene. She was never quite sure what happened, but it was obviously Liel's doing. Irene had no choice but to put up with it, living her life for her sister's sake. Even after they graduated, she hardly left the house in order to protect Liel. Then one day, she met Boris Gurton at a party. Wait, Boris Gurton? That's the name of her love interest? Okay, honestly, it's a good thing her sister's going to steal him, because that is not the name of a heartthrob. Anyway, Boris was one of the first people to understand her situation and always stood by her side. One day, he asked for her hand in marriage. Irene wasn't exactly head over heels for him, and he didn't come from the best family, but she hoped that by getting married, she could get away from Liel. So she said yes, and they held a hasty engagement ceremony. But as soon as the engagement was announced, he tried to take advantage of her. When she said no, he moved on to Liel, who was only happy to have another weapon to wield against her sister. But Irene had finally had enough. She confronted the two of them and told Liel to never call her sister again, ignoring another one of her feigned collapses. Not exactly an Oscar-winning performance, is it? Irene then took the ring from Boris and ordered him to get out of her house. From then on, she decided to live for herself and herself alone. That's right, girl. I don't know about you guys, but I would have left a long time ago. The first thing she does is order all her possessions to be moved to the 3rd floor. Initially, the butler assumes she will move with Liel, since they've always stayed in adjoining rooms since birth. She quickly corrects his assumption. Liel will stay on the 2nd floor alone from now on. And when the butler asks if her mother has approved this order, she tells him she doesn't need anyone's permission. I am loving this energy from Irene. She's just starting to get acquainted with her new space when suddenly her mother storms in and slaps her. What the heck? It seems Boris, the world's worst fiancé, ran straight to her parents when Liel fainted and told them the whole thing. Now her mother is claiming Irene almost killed her sister. That's a little dramatic, don't you think? Irene argues back that Liel's illness is neither her responsibility nor her fault. Her mother is shocked that she actually stood up for herself, and after hearing how much she has suffered because of her sister, she takes her hand and comforts her. But first, she wants to check on Liel. Any hope that Irene had has now been shattered. It's clear her parents will always put Liel first, no matter the situation. Devastated, she pushes her mother out of her room and falls to the ground sobbing. It's not like she didn't expect that this would happen, but she's still young. You can't blame her for hoping that her parents might finally change. She starts to wonder if the problem is her, if actually she's expecting too much from them. But she's had to make far too many sacrifices already. Like how one time, she was drawing when Liel fell, and from then on, she was never allowed to draw again. Irene knows in her heart she can't keep living like this. She needs to escape this house. The problem is the Chase family are a prestigious and well-known dynasty. Wherever she goes, she'll be captured by her father's men. The only way out is to leave with her parents' consent. So, looks like it's back to plan A, marriage. Though obviously not with Boris. Mainly because I still can't get over that name. Little does Irene know there's a young man in a very similar position at this very moment. His name is Noel Christian, and he's the illegitimate son of Grand Duke Christian. Fortunately for him, both his father and half-brother passed away, leaving him the only successor to the legacy of the Grand Duke. His grandfather refused to accept him as heir, so he gave Noel an impossible condition to prevent him from becoming head of the family. If he wants his father's seat, he has to get married. Doesn't sound too hard, right? Especially when there's a newly single lady from a prosperous family right around the corner. Speaking of Irene, she's just entered her family's meal on her own for the first time, breaking the tradition of accompanying Liel literally everywhere she goes. There's an awkward silence when she arrives, but Irene keeps her calm and sits down. Liel immediately gets up to assure her sister there's no need to apologize for yesterday's incident. But Irene doesn't play along. She sees no need to apologize and calls her out for playing the victim. Her mother is furious, but Irene points out that her sister kissed her fiancé. Surely that's a bigger deal than making her faint. Liel can't wriggle her way out of that one. So instead of denying it, she falls to the floor and starts crying. How predictable. It takes seconds for her parents to come around and start looking after her again. Irene doesn't bother sticking around. She leaves the room and asks her servant to bring all the invitations that she's received. Usually, she has to decline any kind of event because of Liel, but now she can't stand being around her family. And besides, how else is she going to find a husband if she hasn't even made her debut in society? Fortunately, there's a dance being held tonight at Duke Jasmine's mansion. Irene decides to attend and sends her maid out for some new dresses. She picks a lovely golden one, and for the first time in her life, she feels pretty. Liel and her father come to see her off in front of the house, surprised at her glamorous appearance. When she hears that Irene is going to a dance, Liel becomes desperate and tries to stop her from attending. Her father holds her back. I guess somewhere deep down he knows that his eldest daughter deserves a chance to shine. And you have to respect her. It takes a lot of guts to walk into a party all alone without knowing a single person. Her arrival is announced to the other guests, who whisper as she walks in. Because she hasn't been to many events, there are lots of rumors about her appearance and personality. But Irene takes them all by surprise with her stunning looks and ladylike attitude. Spotting her walking past, the hostess of the ball, Lady Jabin Jasmine, thanks her for attending and raising the reputation of her little soiree. She asks Irene to join her table, which is a great opportunity for her. The other ladies are all very curious about Irene. She is basically like the Loch Ness Monster, since hardly anyone has seen her. The conversation then moves to one young master Christian who is rumored to be looking for a wife at this banquet. None of the ladies are interested in marrying the illegitimate son, though I have no idea why. He's going to inherit the title and fortune of a very prestigious family, and as the other guests point out, he's a perfect catch. These girls are too stuck up for their own good. Hearing them talking about Noel like this makes Irene sympathetic. People must have spread rumors about her and Liel just like this at all the parties they couldn't attend. Soon the music starts up and the guests begin to waltz. But the festivities are interrupted when two boys on the dance floor cause a scene. One of them, looking very noble and stoic, is Noel Christian, who immediately catches Irene's eye. I mean, of course he does. He's gorgeous! The other boy, who is clearly very drunk, is making fun of him for being an illegitimate child and calling him all kinds of names to try and provoke him. Noel doesn't rise to his taunts and eventually just walks away after staring him down. The other guests watch in fascination. I'm sure that's not going to help his reputation, but at least he didn't get into a fight. Irene is disgusted by the other guests' attitude and steps outside for a breath of fresh air. She spots Noel standing alone in the garden and somehow finds the courage to approach him. Her courage runs out when she stops in front of him, not knowing what to say. Noel thinks she's trying to pass him, so he steps out of the way. Oh no, is there any way to save this? Apparently, yes. In a desperate move, Irene grabs his arm and offers her assistance. Well, that's one way of doing it. Noel looks a bit uncomfortable. First things first, he wants her to let go of his jacket, which is fair enough. Irene apologizes for her abrupt behavior and explains that she heard the rumors about his inheritance condition. It just so happens that she is also looking for someone to take her away from her family. The young Duke Christian is obviously suspicious, as anyone would be. He warns her that the wife of a Grand Duke isn't a position to take lightly, so if it's not out of necessity, he asks if she's looking for love, tilting her chin to look up at him. Irene quickly turns away, making her intentions clear. She doesn't want love, and she doesn't want power. All she needs is a formal marriage contract and the chance to escape her family. Something in her eyes must be convincing, as he seems to believe in her determination. But Noel doesn't know if he can trust her. He has lots of enemies who might cook up a plot just like this one by sending an innocent girl in as a decoy to steal his inheritance. It's only natural if he feels a bit suspicious. Irene introduces herself formally as the first daughter of the Chase family and insists that she's not any kind of spy, nor is she playing around. She encourages him to investigate her all he wants. Noelle gives her a funny look, apologizes for disrespecting her, and then walks away. I guess it's up to him now whether he will take a leap of faith or turn her down. Only time will tell. On the way home, Irene spots an interesting building and tells the carriage to halt. She slips on a cloak and steps outside, entering what appears to be a gallery. Since she can't totally rely on a marriage proposal to take her away, she also plans to sell her paintings to earn a bit of cash. But she'll have to do it through a middleman and without the knowledge of her family. She approaches the gallery orchestrator and hands him one of her paintings, asking him to give it a price. It's a piece that's very close to her heart. She worked hard on it from start to finish, always painting in secret whenever she had a rare moment alone. The orchestrator praises the colors, forms, and expression of the painting, which comes as a relief to Irene. He offers her 12 gold tiles and encourages her to return with more in the future. First a proposal and now this? Young Miss Irene is making money moves already. She's not doing too bad for her first steps toward freedom. When she returns home that night, the mansion seems deserted. She's almost made it upstairs when Liel appears from the shadows like some kind of demon. I wouldn't be surprised if she was one. Meanwhile, back at the Christian estate, Noelle took Irene at her word and had his servant conduct a thorough investigation into her background. It was difficult to find information on her since she's had a relatively secretive life. Other than the basic details, he only knows that her classmates from the academy don't have a very good impression of her. Uh-oh. Back at the Chase mansion, Liel has all kinds of questions about why she stayed out so late and whether she got any interest from guys. She's clearly just jealous. Irene ignores her and tries to move past her, but Liel catches her arm and says she's changed, asking if this is all because of Boris. She even has the gall to say that Irene should be thanking her for revealing her fiancé's true nature. Talk about delusional! Irene puts her in her place, telling Liel not to use her health as a weapon and claiming that she has nothing to thank her for. Good for you, Irene! The next morning, a letter arrives from Miss Irene with no name indicating who sent it. Liel catches the maid looking at it and takes it herself, promising to hand it to her sister. Yeah, right. The maid is still convinced that Liel is a sweet, innocent little girl, so she agrees. When Liel is alone, she reads the letter with a concerned expression before crumpling it up in her fist. Well, that can't be good. The next day, young Master Christian visits the Chase mansion, where Liel is waiting to greet him with a smile. I think we can all tell what's happening here. Noelle has no idea who she is and asks why Irene isn't here to greet him. Liel claims she was busy and introduces herself instead. Noelle can't help but think they look totally different considering they're sisters. She also talks a lot more than Irene, which quickly gets on his nerves. After showering him with compliments, Liel invites him inside to meet their parents. Noelle follows her with a degree of suspicion. After all, Irene said she wanted to escape this house, so he knows there's a chance she may never have received a letter. Indeed, his hunch is correct. Irene is sitting upstairs in her bedroom wondering why Noelle never reached out to contact her again. Hoping there's just been some kind of mix-up, she asks the maid if any letters arrived for her. The maid insists that no letters have been sent, which is a blatant lie. And Irene knows it. She demands the truth until the maid gives in. Downstairs, Noelle is being led through the house by Liel, who has explained her medical condition and how difficult her life has been up until now. He's not been persuaded just yet. He's still looking for Irene and doesn't believe all the lies her sister is making up. She's really laying it on thick, trying to make it look like Irene is a social climber who never has time for her poor, frail sister. Which could be further from the truth. Liel disappears for a moment to announce the arrival of the young Duke to her parents, giving Noelle a chance to catch a maid and ask her a few questions. And with his good looks, who could say no? A few minutes later, he enters the drawing room to be warmly greeted by the Earl and his wife. He tries to ask about Irene, but even her parents seem to be in on the plot and start talking about Liel instead. Is everyone in this house evil? Why are these people so awful? By this point, Noelle is well and truly fed up. He interrupts the Earl, announcing that he already spoke to 5 maids while he was waiting. Sensing danger, Liel tries to tug on his coat, as if that's going to do anything. Noelle declares that none of the maids could tell him what Irene likes, where she is, or even if she's eaten yet. So either the Chase family are completely neglecting their eldest daughter, or they never had one to begin with. At that point, Irene has discovered the plan and knows just about every member of the house has conspired against her to make this handsome young duke fall for Liel instead. She's racing furiously through the house to try and find her sister, begging that her last hope hasn't yet been taken away. She arrives to the drawing room just in time to hear Noel defending her. He says her family has been treating her horribly and that their daughter must be miserable to have been treated like an outcast for so long. Furious, he abruptly stands up to leave the room and finds Irene crying outside the door. Finally, they found each other after all! Noel doesn't hesitate. He pulls her into a tight hug and tells her to cry all she wants. From now on, he will never leave her side. Here is the romantic lead we were hoping for, ladies! So long, Boris Gurton, you two-timing loser! To have someone to lean on for the first time who will comfort her when she cries, it's totally new for Irene, who was always told off by her mother for crying when she was young. After a moment, she pulls away, suddenly embarrassed to have hugged him for so long. As if that wasn't bad enough, she also got his clothes all wet with her tears. He doesn't seem to mind, so Irene shows him to her room, apologizing that she wasn't able to meet him when he arrived. But it's kind of good that it happened that way. At least now he knows the conditions she's living in. Maybe now he'll believe that she really does want to get married. Noel assures her things are just the same in his own family. His grandfather, the Grand Duke, despises him, and as a result, all the servants and staff mock him. So he can understand why she wants to leave and promises to help her escape. Well, it's not the most romantic proposal I've ever heard, but at least he's agreed. He tells her to call him Noel from now on and asks for permission to call her Irene. Such a gentleman. After he's returned to the Christian estate, Liel comes sprinting into her sister's quarters. Irene cautions her to take care. If she faints, Irene won't be the one to help her up this time. Liel is furious and has no idea how her sister could have possibly got involved with someone as high status as the Grand Prince. Irene answers her calmly, telling her they're even closer than she thinks. She can keep Boris, that piece of trash, if that's the kind of guy she wants. From now on, Irene has got a real man by her side. Liel acts like a total baby and completely loses her temper. I guess after all these years of being pampered and spoiled, she just can't handle when something doesn't go her way. Their parents walk in next, ready to demand answers from their eldest. But right on time, Liel drops to the ground, and instead they order the servants to call a doctor. Okay, I don't want to give her any credit, but did you see that reaction time? She's got that whole fainting act down to a T. Irene gets a stern talking to from her parents, who have no idea what's gotten into her. They accuse Noel of being a bad influence, but Irene sets them straight. The only reason she became like this is because of her parents. Ouch, that's gotta hurt. Her father immediately slaps her, just proving her point. What kind of father can hit his child while claiming he's been a good parent? These guys are just the worst. He looks like he wants to go further, but her mother grabs him and takes him outside to calm down. Once everyone is left, Irene can feel the sting of the slap burning her cheek. But this time, she doesn't feel quite as exhausted as before, because now she has hope. A hope named Noel. However, in the following week, he doesn't contact her once. She wonders if he's encountered some difficulty with his grandfather and wishes she could help him. Then, a maid tells her she's been summoned by her mother. She doesn't explain what for. Apparently, she'll find out when she gets there. Well, that's incredibly vague. Irene steels herself for another scolding. Her mother has always stood with Liel, and this time probably won't be any different. But when she gets downstairs, it's not her mother, but stinky old Boris who is waiting for her. He's got a big smile on his face and greets her with open arms, as if he didn't literally cheat on her with her sister who is standing right next to him. Ugh, these people make me sick. Irene tries to walk away, but Boris catches her and pulls her in for a hug. He clings to her desperately, trying to convince her this is all just a big misunderstanding. Irene kicks him in the shin and he drops to his knees, apologizing for behaving so badly. I don't think begging is going to fix this one, Boris. Haven't you heard? Your fiancé is a baddie now. Irene is embarrassed just looking at him. Liel encourages her to reconsider the marriage, but Irene won't budge. She says she has no feelings for him, which isn't surprising. I mean, who would still want him considering how undignified he looks right now? The whole family is shocked, but before they can protest, Noel appears. He's literally our knight in shining armor. Boris doesn't stand a chance against a gentleman like Noel, but he tries anyway. He grabs a fistful of his collar and starts yelling at him, demanding to know what kind of relationship he has with Irene. Noel makes it very clear that their relationship is special. Even an idiot like Boris can tell what he means by that. He flies into a rage, making such a scene that even Irene's mother is a little embarrassed. Maybe now she'll finally understand why her daughter has no interest in her supposed fiancé. Liel tries to calm him down, but Boris knocks her away. He didn't push that hard, but somehow she ends up on the floor, and suddenly the Earl comes rushing in. His wife takes Liel away, and then he turns on the boy. Boris apologizes for causing a scene and tries to explain himself. Apparently, he sent a letter to Irene and never got a reply, so he came in person instead. Well, it looks like letters are going missing again. I wonder who that could be. Noel announces that he has something to tell the Earl and summons Irene to his side. Her father and fiancé are shocked when she takes his hand, but not as shocked as when he announces that Boris has racked up an enormous debt in the name of House Chase. No way! He's been using Irene's name to take out loans? That's despicable, and just when I thought he couldn't get any worse. Now it seems like he only approached her from the start because of her family's fortune, which, let's be honest, is probably the case. Earl Chase is furious and banishes him from the mansion at once, ordering him never to return. Finally! Boris, of course, blames Noel for causing this mess and tries to throw a punch. Luckily, the Christian family butler steps in at the right time to restrain him, and from there, he is dragged away, kicking and screaming in disgrace. What a mess! Now Earl Chase is in an awkward position of being grateful to Noel. If it wasn't for him, their family reputation would have gone down the drain. He sort of mumbles his gratitude and then heads inside while the young couple take a walk around the garden holding hands. He tells her not to be ashamed, none of this is her fault, and he doesn't judge her for her family. Irene is touched and says she also wants to help with his family. But in order to do that, she will have to meet the big bad grandfather we've heard so much about. Later that afternoon, Liel visits her parents in the sitting room to come and comfort them about Irene. I'm not sure why they need comforting when they're the ones causing all the trouble, but I guess even villains need a hug from time to time. Of course, it's not that simple. Liel has another scheme in mind because when does she not? She tells her father that she actually admires Grand Prince Christian and that she confessed it to Irene. That was when she suddenly approached the prince, and that's how they ended up together, she says. Right on cue, she turns on the waterworks and claims that Irene is taking her true love away from her. Oh, come on! How do these people keep falling for this stuff? She's literally smiling behind their backs. 2 weeks pass since Noel's last visit. Irene actually receives a letter for once, stating that a date has been selected for her meeting with Noel's grandparents. He comes to pick her up in a carriage, taking special care to help her up the steps. He informs her that the Grand Duke was told about her arrival, but he never gave an answer. This could get real awkward real quick. They roll up to an incredibly grand estate, which immediately makes Irene intimidated. Noel assures her that his situation really can't get any worse, so she doesn't need to be worried. That's not exactly reassuring, but it works for Irene. She walks in with a smile, where they are greeted by Tam, the Christian family butler. He warns them that the Grand Duke is silent and stoic as usual, but that doesn't faze Irene, who looks like she's about to go to war. Noel jokes that his grandpa won't eat her, which leaves Tam absolutely floored. Apparently, the Grand Prince isn't the type to tell jokes. Or at least he wasn't before. Noel knocks once and enters to find his grandfather sitting facing the window. He completely ignores his grandson and his guest, even when she stammers her way through an introduction. Irene gets a sudden stroke of genius and tells Noel to wait outside. She can handle this by herself. I just hope she knows what she's doing. Irene has to play this just right. She can't be too forward or she'll seem insincere, but acting too nervous won't work either. So she decides to wait him out. But no matter how much time passes, he refuses to turn around. Eventually, Noel knocks at the door, telling her to come back. They can try again tomorrow. Only when the door snaps shut behind them does the old man finally turn. Anyone else get the feeling they're not going to have much luck with him tomorrow either? Either way, she won't be giving up anytime soon. And it's a good thing she's so determined, because the Grand Duke is just the same tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that. She comes every day for 2 weeks, and not once does the old man ever turn around. Irene is starting to lose confidence at this point, and I mean, who could blame her? as usual, Noelle comes to collect her as she bids the Grand Duke goodbye, promising to return the next day. But this time, the Duke speaks. He tells them not to come again, and even just the sound of his voice makes Noelle start to shake. Irene takes his hand and goes directly against the Grand Duke's word, promising to return the next day. Isn't that just going to make him angrier? Well, I guess that's one way of getting a reaction. Before bidding goodbye that evening, Irene agrees to make tomorrow the last time. If nothing happens, then they can give up. When she gets home, she walks in to find the Earl ripping up all her paintings. Okay, seriously, who allowed this man to become a father? He says she's been disrespecting his authority, both by meeting Noelle every day and by drawing when she was told not to. He warns her that if she does either again, he won't let it go. Poor Irene is left to sob over her torn paintings all night. The next morning, Noelle can tell that something has happened, but she assures him all is fine. Irene walks in alone, as per usual, and tells the Grand Duke that today will be the last time she visits. She was hoping that eventually he would turn around, but now she's getting used to people not caring about her. She confesses that she is exhausted. Even though she was determined, she never expected him to hate Noelle this much. Tears are starting to pool in her eyes when finally, the Duke stands up. He turns around, showing her his face for the first time, and asks her not to cry. So he does have a heart after all. This man is far from the Grand Duke that Noelle remembers from his childhood. The Grand Duke who lost his temper and refused to accept the illegitimate child his son brought home. Ultimately, it was Noelle's father's choice to keep him in the family, so the Grand Duke had no say. But he swore to never call him grandson. He didn't even want to look at him. I'm starting to wonder if there are any good parents in this world. So far, all these people have given their kids is trauma. After Noelle's father died, the gap between him and his grandfather only widened. Then Noelle's elder brother died, and still he refused to accept him. However, as it turns out, he gave the marital condition not to ruin Noelle's life, but to keep him from inheriting a position which would put him in danger from those hungry for the position. When Irene showed up, the Grand Duke was shocked. He thought she was just after Noelle's wealth and power, but after her dedication to turn up every day, he realized her intentions were pure. He didn't want to accept her, but hearing her speech about loneliness and ignorance, he couldn't sit still any longer. His conscience wouldn't let him. Noelle walks in to find his grandfather and fiancé staring at one another, but something has happened and it's urgent. He pulls her out of the room and apologizes in advance, just in time for his brother to arrive. Wait, I thought his brother was dead. Who is this guy? Noelle doesn't want to stand there long enough to make conversation, so he hurries Irene past the man and outside. That guy isn't actually his brother, as it turns out. His name is Count Ascardo Rixus, and he's Noelle's cousin. He's therefore also an heir and basically Noelle's rival. Since he has pure aristocratic blood, there are plenty of people who support Ascardo over Noelle to inherit the position of Grand Duke. Noelle didn't tell her because he didn't want her to know the danger of being with him. He apologizes for keeping the truth and for scaring her, but Irene shuts him up at once. Hasn't he realized by now? She's with him until the end, no matter how many enemies threaten them. Aw, she really is cute when she's mad. On the way home, they discuss the next step in their path towards marriage. If Irene wants to truly be free of her family, she will have to formally sever ties with the Earl and renounce all rights to her inheritance as eldest daughter of the Chase family. It sounds scary, and it kind of is. But that's the only way she can make sure they no longer have a hold on her. Luckily, Noelle is very practical and assures her that even if they get divorced, he will provide so that she can live a comfortable life without the support of her parents. Irene decides to think over the decision and promises to give him an answer tomorrow. When she walks into the house, she immediately knows something is wrong. The lights are all on and her parents are waiting by the door. Uh-oh, this can't be good. She's bracing for a slap, but her mother suddenly rushes over and hugs her? Have they finally had a change of heart? Of course not. Liel has spun another tale that makes it seem like she's only using Noelle for his title, trying to get close to him for the sake of their family. Irene is too tired to fight and tries to go to bed. When she asks her father to move out of her way, he raises his fist to hit her. Thankfully, his wife rushes in and stops him. What I don't understand is how she can still be married to someone so violent. Irene has had enough, and she's not scared of them anymore. She sets everyone straight, telling her family that she is getting married for her own sake and not anyone else's. Her father starts walking towards her. Frightened, Irene backs away and is about to trip on the doorstep when Noelle shows up right on time. He stands beside her and accuses the Earl of ignoring his other daughter, only caring about Liel and never being able to see through her lies. Irene is so grateful to him for standing up to her parents that she makes her decision on the spot, right then and there. She declares her intention to marry Noelle and to cut all ties with her family. At last! This is going to be a real turning point for our girl. Her parents walk away, furious and disgusted by their eldest child. Liel is left to throw insults at her, claiming that she has abandoned the parents who raised her all these years. Irene fires back that they abandoned her first. Liel then switches to Noelle and says if he wants the title so badly, he should marry her instead. Which is crazy, honestly. The Grand Prince says what we're all thinking and tells her he could never marry a liar like Liel. He takes her back to his mansion, where Tam is surprised to see Irene again. He takes Irene up to a guest bedroom, promising to have a permanent room prepared for tomorrow. Irene collapses on the bed the moment he's gone, exhausted from the emotional fatigue of combating her wicked family. The next morning, she is summoned by the Grand Duke, who is for once warm and friendly. Noelle explained her situation, which seems to have softened that steely heart of his. He tells her not to worry about him any longer and turns to his grandson. It seems like he's going to say something, maybe attempt to bridge the gap that has widened like a crack between them for all these years. But then he gives in and changes his mind. I guess that would have been too good to be true. Even so, it's a step in the right direction, and Irene is very grateful that he's decided to accept her, even in the small way that he has shown. After that touching moment, they move on to business, drafting the contract for their marriage agreement. They set some ground rules to establish their relationship. The first is that they have to be married for at least 2 years in order to avoid some suspicion. If they then get a divorce after that time, Noelle agrees to send her 500 gold for the next 90 years. Whoa, that's a crazy amount of money! Irene, girl, just shut up and say yes! Those are all of Noelle's conditions. Irene has none, so they sign the contract and keep it hidden in the corner of the prince's library. It's sealed tight with 5 different spells and requires a special password chosen by Irene to be opened. The next step is to announce their marriage to wider society. Noelle was planning to do it at the 700th anniversary of the Christian dynasty, which is coming up next month. Irene is, understandably, a little overwhelmed at the idea of all those nobles and relatives being present for the announcement, but it's the only way. They probably won't get permission from the Chase family for their marriage, and if Noelle's political opponents find out, they will try to stop it. To announce their engagement in such a high-class setting will ensure that word gets out, and after that, no one can stop them. It puts Irene in a dangerous position, but she's not worried. She trusts Noelle too much to be scared. At least, that's what she thought. Until that evening when she sits by the window to draw and spots him meeting someone in secret under the moonlight. She can tell by the silvery hair and the frown on his face that he's talking to Ascardo Rixus, that sneaky cousin of his. While trying to listen into their conversation, she drops her sketchbook, which catches Ascardo's attention. He turns around just as she ducks beneath the window. When she peeks over the ledge, both boys have disappeared. But she doesn't want to get caught later when someone finds her sketchbook, so Irene hurries out of her room, opening the door just as Noelle was about to knock on it. What is with these two? It's like they have a sixth sense for one another. He hands back the sketchbook and basically tells her that she was incredibly obvious by the window. Both he and Ascardo knew she was watching them. Yeah, that checks out. Irene isn't the most subtle of spies, but Noelle's mind is elsewhere. It seems like Ascardo hit him where it hurts during their conversation in the garden, and now he's insecure about their relationship. Irene assures him that she has no plans to run away. She needs him more than he needs her, probably. And besides, she wouldn't want to be with anyone else. Okay, so maybe Irene isn't subtle, but she definitely is smooth. The next morning, Noelle can't get her words out of his head. He's still blushing when Tam comes in with the day's paperwork. He also delivers a letter. An invitation has arrived from Duke Jasmine, the family who hosted the ball where he first met Irene. When Irene wakes up the next day, she feels more rested than ever. Now that she's escaped from the evil Chase family, she doesn't have to wake up all the time to check on Liel, so no wonder she's sleeping well. A maid comes to deliver water for her to wash up with on the order of the Viscount. It turns out that Butler Boy isn't a butler at all, but the Grand Prince's secretary, and what's more, he's a Viscount. Viscount Tom Escuan. Irene doesn't know much about the Escuan family, other than that they're filthy rich and very powerful. The maid is about to tell the prince that Irene has woken up, but she decides to go and see him herself. The estate is already full of hustle and bustle. Everyone is gathered around a painting by a famous artist being displayed in the hallway. Her curiosity is piqued, so Irene draws closer to hear the discussion of what seasons the painting is depicting. Irene steps in to help, taking a closer look at the picture. The maid and staff aren't expecting much from a girl without any classical training, but Irene confidently states the exact order the seasons are painted in. She even knows the name of the artist and that the painting was made in memory of a departed lover. That's why the seasons don't seem to follow reality, because the landscape being depicted isn't actually real. You might have guessed, but Irene has totally seen this painting before, once when it appeared in the Chase family mansion. Noelle arrives just in time to confirm her theory. The staff look on in shock. They've never seen their grand prince act so soft or sweet as he is in front of Irene. He leads her to a nearby space to talk in private, and even matches his steps to hers so that he doesn't walk too fast. He's too sweet. I can't handle it. They end up in a beautiful greenhouse, completely alone amongst the flowers. He asks her about the painting and if she's interested in art. Of course, she says yes, and he slides over the invitation from Jabin Jasmine. They're organizing an exhibition to support poor artists. He suggests they attend together, blushing a little. He loses his nerve a bit when she doesn't respond, but when Irene suddenly jumps out of her chair and declares that she would really like to go with him, they're literally like high school sweethearts. I can't get over it. The exhibition is in 1 week, so Noelle offers to buy her a new gown in preparation. Irene has a look through her closet, but nothing is fit for an exhibition, and this will be her first time attending a public event with him. She needs to look good. So Irene takes a little cash that she earned from selling her painting and heads out to buy one herself. She's just heading out when the Grand Duke catches her in the corridor. He is surprised to see her going out without an escort and offers to accompany her himself. Well, this could get weird, but at least they're getting closer. Meanwhile, Tam is struggling with all the changes Irene's arrival has brought. Ever since she called Noelle cute, he's been acting weird. And now the Grand Duke, who wouldn't even look at her for 2 weeks, is requesting a carriage to take her dress shopping. Still, he has one brought around, and a moment later the Grand Duke is helping Irene up the steps, just like his grandson. She explains that she wants to buy a dress for the exhibition, so he drops her off at a big fancy store and heads off to take care of some personal affairs. The shop assistant is very keen to assist her until she hears her budget. She assumes that Irene isn't a wealthy customer and therefore isn't worth her time, so she hands her the book of design options and quickly moves on to her next customers. While Irene is looking at the designs, the other customers look down on her, wondering if she's only from a minor family because she came without an escort. One of them even spills a drink all over her and starts laughing with her boyfriend that it's not a big deal because Irene's dress looks so old. Wow, wait until they find out what family she's from. Irene silently bears the humiliation. The girl mentions she's from the Rose family, who, ironically, recently paid their respects to the Chase family. The mean girl is getting irritated that Irene won't respond, but she doesn't want to reveal her identity. Word would get back to her parents and would just end up being a big mess. So instead, she gets up and walks away, telling the girl not to worry. But she doesn't take that well at all. Feeling disrespected, she grabs Irene and raises her hand, aiming to slap her. This is usually the point at which Noelle appears, but today, the job is taken by his grandfather, whose eyes are burning with rage. Everyone in the shop immediately falls silent. They all recognize him, of course, and at first, they are confused as to why the Grand Duke Christian would appear in a random dress shop. He tells the shop assistants to grab a towel for Irene and then turns to the Rose family daughter. The Grand Duke is furious and the mean girl seems absolutely terrified. But instead of letting her get what she deserves, Irene steps in and assures her grandfather that everything is fine. She handles it herself and gives the Rose girl a much-needed lesson in morality. She receives an apology, but it doesn't feel good. I mean, if the Grand Duke hadn't shown up, then she would have just got slapped and had to bear the pain herself. After this whole mess, she has no desire to buy a dress from this store, so they start to leave. The shop assistant tries to stop them, but the Grand Duke makes it clear that they will not be visiting this establishment again. That's not going to be good for business, but more importantly, Irene still doesn't have a dress. The Grand Duke seems very concerned for his future granddaughter-in-law on the carriage ride home. In future, he says, she should always tell him when things like this occur. He hands over a pretty little box with 2 matching rings, one for her and one for Noelle. He wanted to do something for them to mark the occasion of their first outing together. But if he gave it to Noelle, he doesn't think he would accept it, so he asks Irene to deliver the second ring instead. Irene can't keep quiet. She doesn't know the full story between the Duke and the Prince, but she knows Noelle has gone through a lot of heartbreak, and receiving something like this might feel a little painful. Even so, she promises to do her best to convey the Grand Duke's kindness. It's just that Irene knows better than anyone what it's like to have a difficult relationship with a family member. Imagine if your evil stepmother suddenly started giving you gifts once you got a boyfriend. You'd be so confused. Irene just wants to avoid that same emotional distress for Noelle. The Duke knows she's right and apologizes for trying to move too fast with Noelle. When they arrive back at the estate, she thanks him for his help and company today. She's just heading to bed when she finds a big blue box with a ribbon atop her bed. Inside is a beautiful pale blue dress. It's definitely twice the price she could afford. She tries it on, and the maids say it was left by Noelle just before she came in. So Irene grabs the ring box and sprints after him, not bothering to change out of the dress. "Wait, girl! Don't ruin the surprise!" She catches him in the hallway just before his office. The magical moment is broken by the sound of her panting because Bestie literally sprinted halfway across the mansion to find him. She thanks him for the dress, and Noelle says it suits her very well. He spots the ring box, and suddenly she gets nervous. What if he gets uncomfortable with the gift and starts avoiding her? Summoning her courage, Irene presents the rings and says the Grand Duke wanted them to wear them to the exhibition. Noelle is quiet for a moment, so Irene assures him that they don't have to wear them if he doesn't want to. He asks for her opinion, and she admits that she thinks it would be nice to wear them together. But somehow he gets confused. I guess maybe he thought she bought the rings for them? Anyway, he asks her to put the ring on for him, giving them a chance to get very close indeed. When Irene looks up, they're so close she thinks her heart might implode. Then he asks for her hand and slips her ring on too. Why does it feel like they're getting married? Anyone else? Halfway across town, there's someone else who is also struggling to breathe. It's Liel, who is actually struggling from her illness for once. The maids just aren't as good at handling her the way Irene used to, so she keeps getting frustrated and moody whenever her condition worsens. The maids also miss Irene, which is kind of funny. She was always so calm and mature, and Liel is, well, we all know what Liel is like. While hiding in the shadows, she overhears one of the maids saying that her true personality has finally revealed itself. They wish they could leave too, just like Irene did. Liel suddenly steps into the light, smiling as wide as she possibly can to pretend she didn't hear them. She spots a pile of letters in their hands. They are addressed to Lady Irene, being kept safe until they can be sent on to her. Liel demands they hand them over, but the maid refuses, so she slaps her. Hard. Why does everyone in this Manhwa resort to violence at the first sign of trouble? I guess she takes after her father. Like a complete psychopath, Liel then starts acting sweet again, claiming that she's having a hard time because of her sister's absence. The maid has no choice but to hand over the letters, revealing an invitation to Duke Jasmine's mansion for the exhibition. Uh-oh, I think we can all see where this is going. Irene, who has no idea what awaits her at the exhibition, has got all dressed up in her fancy gown, which perfectly complements Noelle's outfit. They're the perfect pair. Noelle leads her to the carriage with his usual care and attention, but Irene can't quite relax into the atmosphere. This is their first outing together, so she has to hold herself well. Just before their carriage leaves, the Duke spots the ring on Noelle's finger. With a warm smile, he tells them to take care and bids them farewell. I think that meant a lot to him. The young couple seem especially sentimental this evening. On the way to the exhibition, they talk about how grateful they are to have one another. If it wasn't for Irene, Noelle would have run away by now. Thanks to her, he has the strength to keep going. He suddenly stutters and says he doesn't want to make her feel awkward. But Irene jumps up and assures him she's just as happy. At just that moment, the carriage rolls over a stone and Irene nearly falls. Noelle is there in a heartbeat to hold her steady. I think the danger's past, Noelle. You can let her go now, buddy. After that, Noelle keeps hiding his face in his hands, but Irene is glowing with joy. They soon arrive at the Jasmine mansion, where the lady of the house comes over to welcome them. She seems very excited to have discovered them as a couple, but promises not to make a fuss at the event. Why do I get the sense she's not going to keep that promise? Before they head inside, Noelle admits that his eyesight isn't the best and asks her to explain the pieces as they walk around. I wonder if that's the truth or just a very strategic excuse. Irene is true to her word and talks him through the history and inspiration of all the paintings they come across. It gives them the perfect chance to bond, enjoying the chance to spend time together in public. That is, until Liel shows up. As per usual, Liel is very good at playing the role of sweet, innocent sister. She makes a comment about her dress and reaches out for Irene. Before they can touch, Noelle grabs her wrist, but that's exactly what she wants. Liel is delighted to have a chance to threaten him, especially with so many people around. His reputation really can't afford any more rumors, and if he's seen being aggressive with a girl who has a health condition… Ugh, I really hate Liel. She's too clever for her own good. Irene doesn't want to cause a scene either, but she also refuses to back down and run away. She asks her sister to step outside so that they can talk in private, leaving Noelle inside for a moment. Liel also asks her bodyguards to leave, but they're under strict orders from the Earl to protect her at all costs. Like the maniac she is, Liel grabs one of their swords and holds it against her neck, demanding they get out. She keeps the sword with her and asks if Irene wants her to die. She starts to cry, confessing how exhausted she feels without her old guardian around to take care of her. The servants all look down on her, and her body is so weak. She begs Irene to come back, or else she'll be miserable. Great, so now she's guilt-tripping her. She just gets more and more desperate. Standing her ground, Irene reminds her that she cut ties with the family. She can't be bullied into submission and refuses to return home. Liel throws the sword to the ground, asking why she could be so cocky when she would be dead if not for their family. Wait, what is that supposed to mean? Of course, Liel refuses to elaborate. All she says is that Irene will regret her actions and that Noelle will eventually abandon her after she has fulfilled her purpose. Girl, have you seen the way he looks at her? Irene acts like her words don't hurt, but when she walks away, they're still ringing in her head. She returns to the exhibition to hear people gossiping about Noelle and claiming no one would marry a guy like him. This is why she has to shake Liel out of her mind. Noelle needs her, and more importantly, she needs him. Loud enough for everyone to hear, she calls his name and walks over to him, apologizing for the long wait. She takes him by the arm, hearing whispers spread like wildfire around them. I think if Liel saw them like this, she would faint for real. After their first public appearance as a couple, Noelle's enemies are flustered. They want to act out against Irene, but they're worried about getting on the Grand Duke's bad side. By now, everyone knows how much he favors her. They ask Count Escardo for more intel, but he doesn't know much. He didn't realize her relationship with Noelle was getting serious, and besides, no one expected the cold Grand Duke Christian to like her so much. It's a big problem for their side. You see, 23 years ago, before Noelle and Irene were even born, there was a big uprising and the Emperor was dethroned. He was replaced with another man, but that guy is basically just a puppet. In fact, the Christian family is widely regarded to be more powerful than the imperial family. So to be the Grand Duke is to be the most powerful man in the empire. That's why these people are so desperate not to let Noelle take the position. While they're conspiring against him, the Christian estate is busy preparing for their 700th anniversary. It's only a week away, so everyone is very stressed. Everyone except Irene, who has all the time in the world and nothing to do with it. She wants to see Noelle, but since there are so many people visiting the mansion these days, she decides to take on a disguise as a maid so that no one finds out she's living there. The moment she steps out of her room, she hears some men talking about her. There are already rumors going around that she's staying at the Christian estate, so when she walks out in her maid disguise, they immediately recognize her. They start shouting, trying to get her to turn around, but Irene just keeps walking. Unfortunately, the one who comes to her rescue is Escardo, who keeps up the pretense. He takes her to a secluded spot in the garden and asks if she can do him a favor in return for his help. Irene refuses. Noelle's fiancé senses must have been tingling because he arrives a moment later looking mad as heck. He grabs Irene's hand at once and pulls her away from Escardo, asking what business he has with his fiancé. He makes his position very clear to Escardo and walks away, tugging Irene with him. Great. If anyone sees them now, it'll be obvious who she is. Even though he's clearly angry, he holds her hand carefully until they're in a quiet enough space to talk. Noelle is frustrated that was Escardo who helped her. It's never good to be in debt to your enemies. He warns her that his cousin is incredibly dangerous and asks her never to get close to him. He can tell she feels guilty and begins to comfort her about the situation. Clearly, he can read her like a book. It makes her nervous, so out of nowhere, she reminds him that their relationship is only based on a contract. Whoa, bestie, what are we doing? Obviously, Noelle doesn't like hearing that, but he tries to match her mood and remind himself not to get carried. He brings her to his office to discuss the upcoming anniversary and even makes her coffee. Is that part of the contract too? The plan is to announce their marriage at the banquet and attract as much attention as possible. First, they need the Grand Duke's approval, but Noel feels confident and plans to do it himself. He also decided to change Irene's maid, which she agrees to do without hesitation. As it turns out, this is no ordinary maid. The lady waiting for Irene outside her bedroom is probably the scariest character we've seen so far. Her name is Louielle, and despite her terrifying appearance, she's kind of a cutie. She's completely caught off guard because Irene is the first person who hasn't asked about her scar. I guess people in this empire don't know how to mind their own business. The only thing that does pique her interest is that awkward sword strapped to her maid costume. She should probably be wearing armor, but apparently Noel asked her to hide her abilities as much as possible. Her armor is being hidden by her maid uniform, and no one other than Tam and Noel know that she's actually a battle maid. While Irene and Louielle are getting acquainted, Noel has acquired a painting that his grandfather was said to like. He's hoping that if he gives the Duke a gift, he might be more inclined to accept the marriage proposal. Here's hoping. Noel feels nervous, even just standing at the door. It brings back a lot of painful memories of being ignored as a child, but this time, his grandfather answers and invites him inside. With the painting in hand, Noel visits his grandfather's office and offers him the gift, telling him Irene picked it out especially. The painting depicts a barren but warm-looking room. Because the space is empty, it's said that anyone who looks at it can project their own emotions and thoughts into the picture. The Grand Duke is impressed. Irene certainly chose well. He asks his grandson to pass on his thanks, and Noel takes the opportunity to ask what the Grand Duke wants to fill that space with, the one in the painting. It's clear that there's something on the Grand Duke's mind, but for whatever reason, he evades the question. Whatever he wanted is no longer possible, or so he seems to think. For a moment, it seems like he's going to withdraw, but suddenly he gains the courage to stand up and apologize to his grandson. For everything. Noel has probably waited years to hear those words, but he can't understand why he's chosen now of all times. The Grand Duke doesn't try to make any excuses and admits that he doesn't expect Noel to forgive him. Honestly, that's smart. I think anyone in Noel's position would take quite some time to get over those years of hurt. But even now, he seems upset. He can't understand why his grandfather tried to take the position of Grand Duke away from him. The old man explains that he has only ever tried to protect him and officially accepts his marriage to Irene. Suddenly, Noel is in a strange position. After a whole lifetime of mistreatment and constantly feeling like he wasn't good enough, suddenly everything he longed for has been granted in one evening. It's a weird feeling. He can't quite figure out what's going on. Still kind of confused, he explains their plan to announce the marriage at the anniversary party and asks his grandfather to agree. Not only does he accept, he also suggests they have dinner together sometime, the three of them, so that he can get to know his future granddaughter-in-law. Aw, this is so heartwarming. While walking back through the corridors, Noel tries to sort through his feelings. Everything is going his way, so then why is he so mad? If there's one person who might understand him, it's Irene. The bride-to-be has just finished being fitted for a dress in her quarters. After the seamstress leaves, Louielle offers her mistress a foot massage to ease her aching muscles. If that isn't dedication, then I don't know what is. Suddenly, the battle maid hears a noise at the door. It sounds like someone is pacing back and forth, which makes her suspicious. She orders Irene to stay behind as she advances toward the intruder. In one sudden move, she opens the door and draws her sword, pointing it right at her master's neck. Yikes! She's almost too good at her job. Louielle eventually lowers her weapon, but not before asking why he was acting so suspicious. The atmosphere suddenly gets a little awkward. Louielle really can't read the room, so Irene steps in and asks her to give them some privacy. Noel is pretty impressed that she's already so protective of Irene, but eventually she steps outside and the two sit down for some tea. He explains what happened in his grandfather's office, including the good news that he's accepted their marriage. But when he gets to the apology, he starts shaking. Poor kid, he must be so traumatized. He wants Irene to give him some advice, or maybe just explain why he still feels so upset. And of all people, she really can sympathize. If everyone in her family suddenly apologized for treating her so awfully, she would probably feel the same. It's difficult to feel happy when you've suffered for so long. After all, if their families knew they were doing something wrong, then why didn't they apologize sooner? Or better yet, why did they do it in the first place? Irene reassures her fiancé that she would be just as confused as him. But there is still a part of Noel that's happy. He lets a few tears slip, and Irene gets up to comfort him at once. She encourages him to let it all out, whatever it is. He doesn't need to do anything right now except cry if he wants to. Noel is so grateful for Irene's help. This is why they're perfect for each other. Literally, no one else would be able to understand these two except themselves. He thanks Irene and tells her to let him know whenever she's sad so that he can return the favor. Ugh, this boy is such a green flag. He's more emotionally available than most boys in real life. Irene bids him goodbye with a smile, but their conversation keeps her awake later that night. The truth is, she's jealous of Noel. There's no way her family or her horrible sister will ever apologize for all the pain they've caused her. And even if they did, she wouldn't go back to them. The next day is the long-awaited banquet. From the moment Irene wakes up, she's surrounded by maids helping her get dressed. But when she finally sees her gown, everything fades away. As expected, she looks absolutely breathtaking once they're finished. I just know Noel is going to be speechless when he sees her. Even Irene is pretty impressed with herself. Louie compliments her beauty as the other maids step out to give her some privacy. She's still adjusting to her new appearance when a knock at the door announces her fiancé's arrival. Just like I predicted, Noel is too stunned to speak when he opens the door. But this fool is too embarrassed to tell her she looks beautiful and just hurries her along instead. Oh, Noel, this would all be so much easier if he could just be honest. Louie automatically follows from close behind, but Noel asks her to stay behind in case there are any break-ins. Let's be honest, we all know he's really just scared of her. Either way, she accepts the order and the young couple head on alone. They're just approaching the banquet hall when Irene starts to get nervous, like really nervous. She can't stop her hands from shaking. Luckily, Noel is there to calm her down as always. Just knowing that she has him by her side makes it easier to walk into a room full of strangers who are watching their every movement from the moment they step inside. Noel finally whispers a compliment about her beauty, and Irene tells him that he also looks very handsome. He suggests that they sneak off to the greenhouse with some tea after the banquet has finished. Clearly, he doesn't want to share his gorgeous fiancée with all these guests. They approach the Grand Duke while the guests start to gossip about what an attractive young couple they make. On his grandfather's command, the music starts up, so Noel invites Irene to dance. She struggles for the first few steps, remembering the way her mother used to criticize her dancing skills. But Noel, as always, pulls her out of her head and tells her to focus on him instead. Which is so cute. Plus, it doesn't hurt that the guests are totally transfixed watching them stare into each other's eyes. Even when Irene accidentally steps on his foot, no one notices. When the first dance ends, they return to the Grand Duke, who praises the young couple so warmly that his guests can hardly believe it. Everyone thought he and his grandson didn't get along. Well, newsflash, people, things have changed. I'm sure Noel's enemies are very disappointed right now. Irene's attention is caught by the paintings around the banquet hall, which she hasn't had much opportunity to visit. But there's one painting in particular that catches her eye, the one Noel gave to his grandfather. The Grand Duke is pleased that she notices it. Normally, you can't hang a painting from an unknown artist in such an important room. He must have broken all the rules to put it up there, which is making the guests even more curious. Exactly how much must he favor this young couple to go against family traditions for them? While he's got their attention, the Grand Duke thanks his guests for attending and encourages them to enjoy the festivities. Noel notices two guests trying to approach them, probably to split them up. So he grabs Irene's hand and takes her up to the balcony to wait out the rest of the party. Irene hops up on the ledge, and when Noel leans in, she thinks he's finally going to kiss her. Actually, he just wanted to fix her dress. Can this boy not take a hint? He notices her blushing and reaches towards her face, just in time for Tom to walk in on what looks like a very suspicious scene. After their moment of privacy was interrupted, they decide to head back to the party. Noel holds out his hand, worried that Irene is going to ignore him. What, is he crazy? Does this guy not realize she's head over heels for him? Honestly, I can't with these two. As you already guessed, she does take his hand, and they head back inside together to once again greet the Grand Duke and the Crown Prince, who is also here, apparently. They ask if they can make an announcement, so Grand Duke Christian asks the prince for his approval. You see, if there's one thing you need to know about the prince, it's that he never says no to a plot twist. He never turns down an opportunity for a bit of drama, no matter how gruesome. So of course, when Noelle offers him something more interesting than the standard banquet, he can't refuse. Even though the other nobles who are against Noelle protest, they can't do anything to stop them if the prince has already accepted. So the young couple ascend the stairs hand in hand, reassuring each other as the tension starts to climb. But Noelle gets it over with pretty quickly, and straight out announces his upcoming marriage to Irene Chase to the whole room. Is it just me, or does anyone else wish he did that with a little more flair? This kid is too noble. Everyone goes pretty quiet after that. Irene spots her parents in the crowd, but she doesn't let them sway her. She's not going back to the Chase family, so there's no point even looking at them now. The next person she catches sight of is Escardo, who arrived late. And that's not the only suspicious thing about him. There's also some kind of blue smoke radiating from his necklace. Well, that's scary as heck. Why is no one freaking out? Even Noelle doesn't seem to have noticed it. Irene watches in fear as the smoke makes its way up the steps towards her. It's right in front of her when Irene cries out "no" in her head, and some strange ethereal voice responds to her. After that, the smoke sort of just backs away, infuriating Escardo. What kind of witchy voodoo was that? And why did it just go away when she asked it to? By the time Irene has recovered, the party has finished. Back at the Rixus mansion, Escardo is having a meltdown about his necklace that didn't work. It was clearly a very powerful magic, but for some reason, it didn't work on Irene. Does that mean she's special, or was the necklace just fake? Either way, Escardo failed to stop the marriage announcement, but I think we can all tell he's got something else up his sleeve. Just like Noelle promised, the young couple go out to the greenhouse for tea after the banquet has finished. Irene confesses what she saw, which makes Noelle very concerned. He doesn't know exactly what his cousin was up to, but come on, it's Escardo! It can't have been good! The conversation then turns to the issue of their rooms. Irene thinks they should continue sleeping in separate bedrooms, and so does Noelle. But he decides to tease her a bit by suggesting they share a bed, or at least he tries to. I don't think anyone would believe him when he's blushing like that. Things are still awkward on the way back to Irene's room, where he bids her goodnight. He almost asks to come inside, and not for any funny business, but just so they could spend more time together. This boy is down so bad for her. Normally, anniversary banquets last about 1 week, but this one lasted just under 3 days, mainly because of the engagement announcement. Overnight, the young couple became famous and had their pictures printed in every newspaper. Now they're the talk of the town, but luckily, Irene's life goes on pretty much as normal thanks to Louiel and her fiancé. Until one day, her parents manage to sneak their way into the Christian estate. Her mother pulls her into a tight hug, asking her all of these questions about how she's been and if she's lost weight. Well, at least she cares, unlike her father. Louiel is there a second later to break them up, shoving her sword in the woman's face and forcing them to keep their distance. She tells Irene to head back to her room, but Irene is determined to deal with them herself. As you probably expected, her mother admits their faults and asks her to come back home. The Earl also apologizes and promises to respect her from now on. Yeah, right. If they really respected her, they would have left her alone to live her life. Irene honestly thanks them for raising her, but draws the line there. She has no intention of coming back to the Chase family mansion because that's not her home anymore. Noelle appears at just the right time to scare them away, calling them strangers and telling them to get out of his home. The Earl just embarrasses himself even further by screaming at his daughter like always. After that, Noelle sends them firmly on their way. They're such a cute power couple. After the incident, they have tea together, and Noelle praises her for standing up to her parents. He even gives her a little pat on the head. He also tells her not to let them get to her, but Irene is struggling to listen while he's stroking her hair. And who can blame her? I would be too. The next day, the two of them have lunch with the Grand Duke. It feels a little formal, but the atmosphere is good, and the food is even better. As soon as they're sat down, Grand Duke Christian asks when they'll be getting married. Yikes, couldn't you have at least waited until the main course? Irene is so surprised that she chokes on her food. The boys offer her water at exactly the same time, and since she doesn't want to be rude to their elder, she accepts the glass offered by the Grand Duke. Poor Noelle. After she's recovered, he explains the plan to his grandfather. They want to get married ASAP in a small private ceremony with only a few select guests. Noelle wants to organize everything himself. All he asks of his grandfather is to accept Irene. Has he even been paying attention? I'm pretty sure the Duke likes her more than him at this point. The Grand Duke has no problem. It's really the Emperor's approval they need. They need his signature in order to accept a new member into their family, and if the Emperor doesn't approve of Irene, then, well, the whole thing will have to be called off. Obviously, that puts a heck of a lot of pressure on Irene. The Emperor invites them to the palace within the next few days, so once again, she has to get all dolled up for the meeting. Noel, as usual, gets tongue-tied the moment he sees her. They make the journey without the Grand Duke because Noel wants to turn their visit into another opportunity for a date. For someone trying to hide his feelings, he sure does love a chance to woo his lady. Irene is delighted at the idea since she's never been to the Imperial Palace before. She's temporarily stunned when they arrive, since the grounds are so beautiful. They're greeted by a lady named Akel, who leads them through the gardens to have a look around. Irene can't stop looking at the flowers, while Noel is distracted by someone else entirely. He's so predictable. Finally, they reach the main palace, where the Emperor is waiting inside a room completely covered in gold. Intimidating much? The Emperor seems to have a good opinion of Noel, but he hasn't heard much about Irene until recently. He beckons her to come closer, and his face darkens. Is anyone else getting creepy vibes? It kind of seems like he wants Irene for himself. She's totally freaked out, especially when the Emperor asks her to raise her head only inches away from her face. Well, this took a turn. Nervous, Irene takes a step backwards and nearly falls down the steps. Noel catches her just in time, and suddenly the tension dissipates. The Emperor apologizes for worrying her and says she reminded him of someone else. That's a little weird. To make up for it, he promises them he'll accept the match and tells them to take a walk around the grounds first. While the kids are in the garden, Noel finally reveals the reason he wants to become the Grand Duke so badly. As we already know, it's because he has no choice. If he doesn't take the title, he'll be killed. Obviously, Irene has never heard any of this before, so she's very concerned. Noel explains the political ties between the royal family and the Christian family. Because they're very powerful, the issue of successor and any members joining the Christian family are very important. While the previous emperor supported Noel's claim to the position of Grand Duke, this emperor secretly supports Escardo. That's why this visit is so important. With his marriage to Irene, Noel finally has a chance to get one up on his cousin and convince the emperor to side with him instead. Since she's already proven that the Grand Duke and direct heir are very fond of her, she's become a very powerful person without realizing it. If she does become the Grand Duchess, she will gain not only information about the Christian family, but also a lot of power and money. So this meeting isn't really about whether the Emperor will side with Noel or Escardo. It's about whether he will use Irene to get more knowledge and control over the Christian family. So that's why he was being so creepy. As if Irene wasn't under enough pressure already. Fortunately, Noel is very good at reassuring her about all these very scary politics. Once Irene is less stressed, they head to the main palace to look at the royal portrait gallery. Notably, every previous emperor has a painting with his empress. Everyone except the current emperor. Is it just me, or is that majorly sus? They run into Noel's uncle, Count Rixus, who says all sorts of horrible things about Noel's illegitimate birth and tries to dissuade him from running for the position of Grand Duke. Just like Irene did with her horrible family, Noel stands his ground. Irene supports him too, promising to stay by his side and warning the evil uncle that Noel will be the one to claim the title in the end. After that uncomfortable confrontation, the Emperor finally calls them back into the throne room to hear his decision. Fortunately, everything goes smoothly, and the Emperor officially accepts Irene as a new member of the Christian family. The young couple can hardly believe their luck. Does this mean the Emperor wants Irene to be his informant, like Noel said? He certainly seems to like her. He even invites Irene to come and have dinner at the Imperial Palace after her wedding. She must be doing something right. Confusingly, he also gives Noel some encouragement, acknowledging how difficult things must have been for him recently. I'm so lost. Whose side is he on? Noel and Irene head back to the Christian estate, happy to have got what they came for. Irene was so worried the night before that she didn't sleep much and is now kind of exhausted. Noel tells her to take a nap, reminding his fiancé that he's already seen her asleep once before. Even if that's true, Irene doesn't want her future husband watching her head whipping all over the place while she tries to nap. So Noel moves places so she can lean on him. What a gentleman. Irene is a little flustered, but when he insists, she decides to take him up on the offer. Let's be honest, That was more for Noel's sake than for hers. Since the wedding is coming up very soon, he spends all his time over the next couple of days preparing for the ceremony. Safety is their top priority, so access to the Christian estate will be restricted to a very small number of nobles. Technically, they're not allowed to do that, but with the approval of both the Grand Duke and the Emperor, no one can stand in their way. The seamstress, as always, is delighted to have another chance to create a gown for Irene. And since this is potentially the most important dress of her entire life, she takes even more care than usual to get the measurements absolutely perfect, and asks thousands of questions about the designs. Louiel offers to chase her away, but Irene is dedicated to her new position. After the seamstress is done with her, she has to follow the head maid to take a tour around the mansion while she explains all her future duties concerning the running of the estate. By the end of the day, even Noelle has heard about her crazy schedule and assures her that there's no need to overwork herself. While his fiancée is tired, she is also dedicated to her future family and to returning all the favors Noelle has done for her in the last month. So there's no way she's going to sit back and relax when she needs to learn the ropes of being the Grand Duchess. Tom has been watching the two of them doting over each other and is shocked to see how close they become. Is this guy blind or something? I feel like this has been happening for quite a while already. He awkwardly interrupts to submit a report to Noelle, who seems to have forgotten that he was the one who summoned him. I guess this boy is more obsessed with his wife than with work these days. Tom confirms all the things they asked him to plan, including the date of the marriage, which is in 2 weeks, and the location, which is in the Christian family secret hall. Because, of course, they just happen to have a secret hall lying around for occasions like this. Irene has been paying such good attention to her Duchess training that she already knows where it is. It's not used very often, and the staff refrain from speaking about it. Most of them haven't even seen it, so the fact that Irene already knows about it is kind of crazy. Apparently, she found it by accident on her tour with the head maid. According to Noelle's orders, the ceremony will be as grand as possible. Even though they won't have many guests, they've set the budget to 1 billion gold coins. Damn, go big or go home, I guess. The average noble wedding costs about half that price, but the Christians are not your average noble family. Even so, Irene is worried that racking up such a price will give Count Rixus an excuse to blame him, especially if he's using the Grand Duke's fortune to pay for it. Noelle, on the other hand, doesn't seem worried at all. He asks Irene to come on an outing with him in between all her duties, and to clear her schedule, he offers to finish the tour of the estate with her now. Leaving Tom behind again, they didn't even notice him. First, Noelle takes her to the training ground where the knights gather every day to practice. He tours her through the gardens and hallways, explaining things way better than the head maid did earlier. Maybe she's just better at listening when Noelle is the one talking. When the tour is over, they get a chance to look at the mansion when it's lit up at night. Because the Christian family are insanely wealthy, they use a lot of luminescent stone to keep the estate shining all night long. Since Noelle grew up here, he can't appreciate the beauty the same way Irene does. But looking at his home through her eyes makes him feel a little more grateful. The next morning, Irene is scheduled to visit somewhere important to Louiel, so she gives her battle maid a pretty little ornament to wear in her hair. I guess she's never had the chance to get dolled up before, so she's pretty embarrassed. But her mistress insists she keep it, so Louiel reluctantly accepts the gift. I don't know about you guys, but I think Louiel high-key has a crush on Irene. Look at the way she blushes! When Noelle and Irene arrive at this mystery location, they wear hooded robes to hide their identity, a little overwhelmed by the crowded streets. Eventually, they reach a house labeled as the Ram Mercenary Guild. From the second they step inside, everyone recognizes Noelle, but they call him Ram and treat him like a friend instead of a noble. This is strange. They also recognize Louiel, which makes more sense. I mean, she obviously fits in at a mercenary guild. This must be how Noelle found her in the first place. Noelle warmly introduces Irene to his friends, who are shocked to find out that they're about to get married. They seem to have very negative opinions of Noelle, saying he has a personality disorder, and telling Irene to come to them if she ever feels threatened. Clearly, there are sides to young Master Christian that haven't been revealed. Irene doesn't seem fazed and tells them calmly that she's marrying Noelle because she loves him. Way to drop the L-bomb for the first time, girl! Poor Noelle is totally flustered, but he tries to act normal and pretend like nothing happened. It turns out, Noelle has been recruiting people from this guild for several years already. That must be why Tom can't handle seeing his lovey-dovey side. Because he originally knew Ram, this terrifying alter ego that only comes out in the Mercenary Guild. The atmosphere is a little tense, so Noel asks a kid named Eakin to get some snacks and bring them to his room. Yes, he even has his own room. Eakin returns with the tea and snacks a moment later. Apparently, that's his job within the guild. Once they're alone, Irene has a lot of questions. First, about his name. Noel explains that using his real identity for mercenary work would cause a lot of trouble, which makes sense. Second, as you've probably already guessed, Noel was the founder of this guild. Before his grandfather decided to change his tune, he desperately needed money and a place to go in case his brother became the Grand Duke. This is how he ended up with so much money and why he doesn't need to rely on his grandfather. The members of the guild take on jobs as mercenaries, but also guarding jobs and contracts hunting monsters. The members bring in loads of money, and they even have a separate business running under their name. Meanwhile, no one actually knows who the leader is. To everyone here, he's just some guy with a hidden background who goes by the name of Ram. I guess they respect him enough not to ask questions. Noel brought her here because this place is special to him. After his mother's passing, he moved into the Christian mansion and learned to live with a target on his back. To make life a little easier, he gathered people in a similar position, and eventually, the guild was formed. In a way, the guild feels more like home than the mansion does. Noel is worried about how his fiancé might react, but Irene feels nothing except gratitude. It's a big deal to show her a place like this, especially when he's kept it hidden for so long. Noel is surprised. This girl never ceases to amaze him. But doesn't this make things a little more complicated between the two of them? He can't keep pretending this is just a contractual marriage, not when she knows so much about his past. Noel explains that a boy named Tag has replaced him as commander of the guild. The same Tag who seems suspicious of Irene from the moment they entered. Noel suddenly announces that he wants to take her somewhere and leads them out of the room, to find half the guild listening, eavesdropping outside the door. They're too shocked to apologize, especially when they notice their ex-commander holding Irene's hand. I'm starting to get more and more curious about what kind of guy Noel was before he met Irene. They leave Louiel with the rest of the guild members while they take a carriage to the Tower of Magicians. Access to this place is extremely restricted, and what happens inside is largely a secret. But Noel just barges straight inside without a care in the world. He manages to bypass the giant iron doors, which apparently save your fingerprints to recognize anyone coming in or out of the tower. Seems like a pretty high security place. How come Noel is allowed to just wander in like this? They look super out of place, but no one is even looking at them. They take an elevator to a very high floor, where Noel speaks with a robed magician to check in on some kind of special order he placed. The magician leads them down a corridor to a kind of study, where a man in white with a very long beard is waiting for them. This classic stereotype of a wizard goes by the name Moly Mole, which is actually Noel's personal magician. Seriously, is there anything this guy doesn't have? Moly Mole is pleased to welcome them at this stage in the production. Whatever Noel has requested is almost finished. The wizard summons another magician to bring a very small, unassuming box. Yep, you guessed it, folks. It's a ring box. Noel has charged the most intelligent magicians in the entire empire with the creation of his wife's wedding ring. Although, it's not just any ring. Fitted with an emerald stone, the ring was designed so that even people without magical powers can use it. It has many different abilities. The first of which is the Guardian ability, capable of both attacking enemies and defending the wearer. Moly Mole demonstrates the attacking abilities on a wooden mannequin, totally blowing it to pieces by just pointing his finger. Wait, isn't that kind of dangerous? What if Irene gets mad one day and points at someone, only to accidentally blow them up? The wizard warns her to use it sparingly, since it takes about a day to recharge after every use. He then demonstrates the defense ability, blocking an oncoming attack with a kind of force field that sends the attacker flying backwards. Since this ability uses less magic, she can use it more than once a day, which is useful. They also made a matching ring for Noel. It doesn't contain the same abilities, but it does have a guiding function that shows him where Irene is at all times, so long as she's wearing the ring. I guess that would be a little creepy, but honestly, I just love how obsessed he is with her. The last ability of the rings is Engrave, which stops anyone but the owner of the ring from wearing it. But it's not finished yet. The wizard promises to have the rings completed on the morning of their wedding day. It's clear that Noel and Moly Mole have a very close relationship. more like grandfather and grandson than employer and employee. After a successful visit to the tower, they head back to the carriage. Noel has a hunch they're being watched, and he's right. Escardo is up to his old tricks again and ordered someone to trail them all day. After hearing the report, he orders an investigation into the mercenary guild they visited and orders a small task force to stay near the magic tower, hoping to steal whatever it is Noel has been working on. Ugh, can't this guy just give it a rest? Meanwhile, Noel and Irene stop back at the mercenary guild to pick up Louiel and say their goodbyes. Things are a little tense between the so-called Ram and his new commander Tag, but a few kind words from Noel set them straight again. He wants to tell everyone about his real identity, as all this secrecy has bred distrust. But there are complicated reasons for him to have kept things hidden all this time. He asks Tag and the others to trust him a little while longer, then someday they'll understand. On the carriage ride home, the young heir looks particularly tired, so Irene returns the favor from the other day and lets him lean on her shoulder to sleep. A few days pass, and finally the day of the wedding arrives. The seamstress is acting about 10 times crazier than usual, determined to make Irene the most beautiful bride the Empire has ever seen. But it's worth it. Irene looks absolutely dazzling in her dress, although she seems more impressed by her groom when he arrives. He can tell the pressure is getting to her and reassures Irene that today is about the two of them, not titles or becoming Grand Duchess or proving anything to his enemies. After that, the nerves ease. The ceremony is all set to go ahead as scheduled, except for one small thing. The rings still haven't arrived. Uh-oh, this has got Escardo written all over it. Luckily, Moly Mole anticipated some foul play and has kept the real ring safe with him. Just as he expected, the fakes get intercepted by a bunch of bandits, while Moly Mole and his assistant Ruin head directly to the wedding. They spot yet another act of sabotage when the priest is carried out by two more bandits dressed in black. Damn, Escardo has been busy! They manage to subdue the bandits, but the pastor is still out cold. So Moly Mole just puts on the outfit and takes his place, as if that's not totally illegal, not to mention immoral. While all of this has been going on in the background, Noel and Irene are waiting nervously by the doors, wondering why the ceremony still hasn't started. Just as they're about to check what's happening, the doors open to reveal Moly Mole waiting patiently at the altar. You've got to give it to him. That old man is a pretty good actor. He hosts the ceremony just like a real pastor and asks them to swear themselves to one another. Irene has barely a moment of hesitation before she says, "I do," while Noel answers instantly. He even adds on his own little vow to never let go of her hand. Ugh, how romantic! Moly Mole pulls out the rings and instructs them to seal the magic abilities by sharing a kiss. Well, don't look so surprised. This is a wedding after all. Noel is very flustered at first, but he does as he's told and slips the ring on Irene's finger. She does the same for him, and then the time comes for the all-important kiss. You would think that after all the blushing and hand-holding, they'd be excited to finally seal the deal. But both of them seem hesitant. Irene takes the first step, boldly leaning in and telling him it's okay if he's uncomfortable. That seems to turn on a light bulb in Noel's mind, and suddenly he springs into action. He takes her by the waist, and in one smooth move, he plants a kiss on her lips. Finally! The guests are in awe of the obvious connection between the newlyweds, who also seem a little stunned. Is it just me, or were things getting a little steamy there for a second? The final step is to sign their vows, and then they can walk back down the aisle as a married couple. As a little wedding gift, Moly Mole sends blossoms floating down from the ceiling, causing even more commotion among their guests. I think people will be talking about this wedding for quite some time. The moment they're outside the venue, Noel scoops his wife up, bridal style, and carries her to a carriage. While she's taken back to her chambers to take off all those uncomfortable accessories, Noel heads to a meeting with Moly Mole to discuss the failed sabotage attempts. Noel thanks him for thinking so quickly. I mean, he single-handedly saved the entire wedding. He also did the young duke another favor and looked into the necklace that Escardo was wearing on the night of the banquet. He hasn't found out much about the artifact, but he was intrigued to find out that Irene heard a voice in her head that night. If it were me, I would probably just think she was crazy, but Moly Mole is taking this whole thing very seriously. He even mentions the possibility that Irene has the power to control and manipulate the natural elements. He asks Noel to return to the magic tower another time with Irene so that they can ask a few more questions. He then immediately moves on to the subject of his first kiss. And as if Noelle wasn't red enough already, he reminds the young husband that tonight is a very important night. Irene must be thinking the same thing, since she's got about 3 maids scrubbing her body raw in a rose petal bath. It's only once they wrap her up in a nightdress that she realizes what's going on. These poor kids, they're both just as terrified as each other. Just when she's thinking about Noelle, a knock at the door sounds his arrival. She's about to open it, but she hesitates, suddenly nervous about him seeing her pajamas. Noelle eventually enters by himself to find her already tucked up in bed. Noelle suddenly realizes that she's not prepared for them to spend the night together. So, like a true gentleman, he reassures her that there's no pressure and decides to sleep in another room. He's just heading for the door when she catches his sleeve and asks him to stay. Oh, thank goodness. I really thought she was going to let him walk away. Still, this couple is too awkward to share a bed, so Noelle takes the couch and leaves her in the bed alone. Ugh, so close and yet so far. Neither of them can sleep with the other in the room, so they decide to share a bottle of wine to calm their nerves. Noelle starts teasing her about how she clearly never realized what married life would actually mean. But suddenly, from out of nowhere, Irene suggests they sleep together. Wait, what? I was not expecting that. Noelle goes bright red, mainly because her robe has slipped down at the perfect moment, exposing her, well, you can see what it's exposing. He assumes she's drunk, but honestly, she just seems a little more relaxed. They only had one drink, and as always, her main motivation is to be a good wife and fulfill her duty. In this case, that means sleeping in the same bed. Noelle is so charmed by the flush on her cheeks and her adorable smile. He just stands there and watches her get into bed, patting the spot next to her. So he obeys his wife and joins her in bed, with his shirt on, lying a polite distance apart. But don't worry, drunk Irene fixes that a moment later by rolling a little closer and rambling about how lucky she is to have him in her life. She's been feeling so grateful for everything he does, but wants to give him something back too, and says she wants to help him more in the future. Girlie, I don't think he's listening to a word you're saying. As if it wasn't bad before, he definitely can't sleep now, so Noelle gets up for a walk, making sure to tuck her comfortably under the covers. Quietly, he thanks her for coming into his life and assures Irene that her presence already helps him enough. Ugh, these two. I just wish they could say these things to their faces and not when they're drunk or asleep. The next morning, Irene is greeted by the sight of her husband emerging from the bath. How's that for a wake-up call? Embarrassed, she rushes to the bathroom, desperately trying to repress thoughts of Noelle coming out of the water. Once she's got a hold of herself, the kids stop by to visit their grandfather before attending their first Senate meeting. Irene is already feeling the pressure, but the Grand Duke puts her at ease, saying she can leave anytime she wants if she's too tired. He also tells her to call him Grandpa in future, which is a pleasant surprise. Just as they're heading inside, Irene spots a nervous expression on her husband's face and tells him not to worry. This boy is so head over heels for her. She barely said anything and suddenly he's all calm and confident. And it looks like he's gonna need it. Count Rixus and Escardo look like they've been scheming again. Fortunately, the Grand Duke is firmly on their side and starts the Senate meeting by reminding his family of the marriage condition that he gave to his grandson. He is just about to announce his approval of Irene when Escardo butts in with a question. He wants to know why the Grand Duke accepted Irene in the first place. After all, aside from the Grand Duke and Noelle, no one has really had a chance to meet her. The Duke vouches for her as a girl from a noble background with a kind and responsible personality. According to him, she's exactly what this family needs. But Escardo claims that that's not the real Irene. In fact, he's brought someone to testify against her. Can you guess who? Yup, that's right. Liel is back, and she's back with a vengeance. From the moment she enters the room, she's got the innocent little sister act totally down. Irene is shocked. Liel is probably the last person she wants to see right now. While she starts to withdraw, the Grand Duke yells at Escardo, furious that he would bring a stranger into the Senate committee without permission. Unbothered, Escardo invites Liel to share her story. As she starts to speak, Irene steels herself. Yes, this is unexpected, but both the Grand Duke and Noelle can vouch for her. Surely their words mean more than some random girls. Although Liel is really pulling out all the stops. She starts crying, telling the Senate how she lost the ability to walk after her sister left. how she didn't even invite their parents to her wedding. And unfortunately, it seems like the Senate are falling for it. From Liel's side, she does look heartless. That is, if you didn't know the background. With Noelle's support, Irene stands up to address this attack on her character. She confirms that everything Liel said is true. Her sister smiles as the Senate members start yelling, outraged. But Irene explains how difficult her childhood was, how she had to give everything up for Liel, how she only got cursed and beaten in return for her sacrifices. The council members still aren't convinced, so she asks them what they would have done in her position. Would they have stayed and let the horrible Chase family walk all over them? Surely no one would choose that. Irene is too good a person to mention the part where Liel literally stole her boyfriend. I definitely would have started with that if I were her. Instead, she gracefully sits back down and lets the Senate make their own decision. One person who is definitely still on Irene's side is the Grand Duke. In fact, he's so angry after hearing her story that he glares at Liel. She's so freaked out that she literally faints into Escardo's arms. He takes her back to the Rixix mansion, angry that his secret weapon has backfired. Even Liel is confused. She wasn't expecting Irene to stand up for herself. Clearly, this is not the same sister who left that day at the Chase mansion. Escardo is frustrated, but he still has a few more tricks up his sleeve. After Liel's departure, the Senate needs some time to discuss in private. The newlyweds sit outside the committee room where Irene apologizes. She's worried that his inheritance will be in jeopardy once again, all because of her. But Noelle doesn't care. He's proud that she spoke so honestly about what happened between the Chase family and her. Now the truth is out in the open, they can live freely without having to worry about hiding her past. Irene still seems worried. What if, after everything they've been through, the Senate refused to accept her as the future Grand Duchess? Can they even do that now that they're already married? Then, Noelle says the most romantic thing ever. He promises that even if they don't accept her, even if he loses his inheritance, they can just run away together and live alone. Just the two of them. How cute is that? Irene loves the idea, but she does wonder what that means for their contract. After all, if she can't help him inherit the position of Grand Duke, then there's no need for them to stay married. That's what they agreed, but a lot has changed since then. Maybe their feelings are strong enough to keep them together no matter what happens. Back at the Senate conference, the Grand Duke is in a tricky position. If he could do things his way, he would just give Noelle his position and tell the others to get stuffed. But if he does that, there's a chance the other Christian nobles will rebel or disobey him. So instead, he suggests an alternative. It must have worked, because after a few minutes, they call the young couple back in. The Duke announces that he has not changed his opinion about Irene, but in order to gain the approval of the entire council, he offers them a chance to prove themselves. Apparently, there have been an increase in demonic beast sightings at the Christian mansion in the west of the Empire, in a place called Crayson. If Noelle and Irene can go to Crayson, investigate the cause of this disturbance and return safely, their competence will be recognized and they can officially become Grand Duke and Duchess. Honestly, this sounds like more of a test for Noelle than Irene, but I guess that's more important since it's him the nobles are against. Noelle doesn't want to put his wife in danger, but she forces him to accept, trusting that her husband and that handy magic ring can keep her safe. They'll also take a few guardian knights, so theoretically, there's no reason to be worried. Theoretically, that is. Noelle accepts on the condition that he can prepare the investigation team himself. The Duke accepts, and so the Senate are dismissed. The kids stay behind after the conference is over, giving the Grand Duke a chance to apologize to them. But it's hardly his fault. If he used his power to force everyone to accept, then things would only get harder down the line. This way gives them the best shot at a stable rule later on. So long as they survive whatever is lurking at Crayson. He also feels bad after hearing how rough things were for Irene back at the Chase household. He sends them both back to the mansion to get some rest. Noelle brings up the idea of them eloping again, and Irene mentions the contract. Both of them clearly want to stay in the marriage, even if Noelle doesn't become Grand Duke. But before Irene can assure him that she doesn't care about the contract, Tom comes running in to ask what happened at the Senate. But one look from Noelle makes him shiver. He completely ignores whatever news his right-hand man was about to announce and takes his wife's hand instead. I'm telling you guys, he is literally such a simp for her. Back in the carriage, they finally explain the situation to Tom, who seems nervous about Irene accompanying Noelle out west. He asks about the investigation team. Of course, Noelle already has some people from the guild in mind, but he gives Tom the responsibility of picking a few family knights too. They want to head out as soon as possible to be back before winter starts. That evening is the second time the married couple share a room. Will they actually make it through the night in the same bed this time? Judging by this tension, I doubt it. Noel tries to excuse himself and take a walk first, but Irene won't let him. They can't keep avoiding this forever. Eventually, they have to get used to sleeping together. He acts real stubborn, so Irene decides to come with him. He uses the same excuse she tried, claiming that she might get sick if she takes a walk at night. Yeah, same to you, mister. Finally, he gives in, only because he really is worried about her getting sick. At last, they climb into bed. Irene wishes him sweet dreams before falling straight to sleep, unlike poor Noel, who can hardly contain himself. Looks like this is going to take some getting used to. It doesn't take much to get him hot and bothered. Eventually, he decides to go for a walk, hoping to sleep in his study. But the moment he moves, Irene stirs, and he suddenly remembers what she said. As tough as it is to fall asleep next to a beautiful woman, he's just going to have to adjust. And in the end, it's not so hard. He falls asleep after watching her like 2 minutes, clearly so mesmerized by her beauty that he collapses right away. What a cutie! The next morning, the Ram Mercenary Guild arrived, delighted to finally discover Noel's true identity and visit his home. They knew he was someone important, of course, but they never imagined he would be the heir of the noble Christian family. The investigation team is formed of 10 mercenaries and 10 Christian knights. Is it just me, or does anyone else think they're gonna butt heads? With Ruin the Magician as Noel's bodyguard and Louiel as Irene's, the team is fully formed. They say a brief and slightly awkward goodbye to the Grand Duke, and they're off. Inside the carriage, Irene admits she's more excited than scared. Yes, they're going to a place infested with demonic beasts, but it's still a trip. It's kind of like a honeymoon. Noel suddenly presents her with a matching set of earrings and a gorgeous necklace. No reason, he just wanted to pamper her. She puts them on right away and looks stunning as always. Apparently, there's a miracle tree called Snowwood on their path to Crayson, so they intend to stop off and visit it on the way back. Crayson is famous for being a warm climate, so it doesn't snow even in the winter. Part of that is because of the Snowwood tree, which is always covered in snow no matter the season. The locals think the tree protects them from the harsh winter and is treated kind of like a god. When they arrive at the Crayson estate, the staff are shocked to see Noel acting so kind and gentle with his new wife. Them and everyone else, apparently. The head butler introduces himself as Monkel and takes them straight to their room. Irene can already imagine spending cozy winter evenings reading books in bed with her husband here. Noel suggests she get washed up. Later, they can try a hot spring bath, which Crayson is famous for. Uh-oh, these two can barely sleep in the same bed together. How the heck are they going to manage a bath? Actually, nobles normally take baths separately according to their gender. Since Irene has never been to a hot spring, she probably doesn't know, but now Noel isn't sure he wants to correct her. He's too much of a gentleman to lie, so he explains that they'll bathe separately before they head out. Louiel is already standing outside guarding the door. She really is dedicated to her job. Louiel accompanies her mistress to the ladies' side while Noel heads off to the men's section. As per usual, Louiel is too serious to join her, so Irene steps in alone, enjoying the view of the sunset from the bath. Once she's in the water, she kind of wishes they were actually bathing together. I hope she says something next time. I think we all know Noel would leap at the chance to join her. After a nice long soak, Irene and Noel head back to their room before dinner, leaving Louiel to take a break and try the hot springs for herself. The head chef has prepared quite a feast for the whole expedition squad. As we predicted, the knights and mercenaries are already bickering over the dinner table. With just one word from Irene, the atmosphere completely changes. I guess good food and good company can solve any problem. The next morning, Noel goes off to start their investigation, hoping to find the source of where the monsters originated. Irene is clearly worried about him, so her husband takes the chance to ask her for a kiss to keep him safe. Right, I'm sure that's the reason. He even makes up some saying about a lover's kiss protecting travelers from danger. You gotta hand it to him, this boy is smooth. We all know Irene has been wanting to do this for quite some time, so it's no surprise that she doesn't hesitate. She just asks Noel to lower his head and plants him a perfect little kiss on his cheek before sending him on his way. Baby steps, people. Baby steps. Once the expedition team has departed, Irene isn't sure what to do with herself. A maid comes in with a cup of tea that Noelle requested to help her sleep. It doesn't take long to take effect, so Irene hands Louiel the cup and lies down at once. She is still sleeping by the time Noelle returns, so he excuses Louiel and promises to look after her himself. Reluctantly, the battle maid backs off, allowing Noelle to perch on her bedside. When Irene wakes up, he calls her Madam, which she loves for some reason. Sounds a little formal to me. Noelle tells her to sleep more if she wants to, surprised by how long she was in bed. Irene assures him she's fine, but when she moves to put her slippers on, she loses strength and nearly falls over. Okay, what was in that tea? Noelle is now a little concerned, so he kneels down to help her put her slippers on. It's a little extra, but again, Irene loves it. At this point, I think he could do just about anything and her cheeks would turn red. Louiel brings dinner in, clearly as an excuse to check in on her mistress. Seeing that Irene is well taken care of, she leaves the married couple to eat in private. Irene almost chokes on her first mouthful when Noelle calls her Madam again. I think he took her words a bit too literally. Irene barely even remembers admitting that she liked hearing it. Is it just me, or is that another red flag? She drank some random tea, fell straight asleep, and now she's weak and her memory is hazy? This whole thing screams sus. After dinner, Noelle goes to wash up while Louiel clears the dinner table. As if the whole Madam thing wasn't bad enough, Noelle nearly makes her faint when he walks back in half naked and dripping. Come on, give her a break! Louiel brings them snacks and more tea while they talk about the day's investigation. They found the source of the monsters, but there's still a lot of work to do. The place from which they appeared was near the Snowwood tree, which makes everything a whole lot more complicated. Fortunately, Noelle is still feeling confident. Then, out of nowhere, he asks why she keeps avoiding him. Maybe because you walk out of the bathroom half naked? Poor Irene is stumped. She can't exactly tell him that she's too nervous to make eye contact, although, judging by her expression, it wouldn't be hard for him to guess. Noelle completely misunderstands and thinks she's sick. He stands up and carries her to bed immediately, telling her to get some rest. Didn't she spend the whole day sleeping already? I love this kid, but he is a bit overkill sometimes. Of course, Irene loves it, as usual. She never had someone care for her the way Noelle does, so even if he's kind of a drama queen, it's okay. Noelle refuses to fall asleep until she does, which only makes it harder for her to relax. She pretends to fall asleep, so Noelle gets into bed beside her, even though he 100% knows she's faking. These two are just as bad as each other. 4 days later, and Noelle has started investigating the area around the Snowwood tree. Irene is getting more worried as time wears on. From what she knows about demonic beasts, they're creatures of nightmare that usually appear in dark and dangerous places, not sleepy little regions like Crayson. She tells him to stay safe and waves him off, returning to her quarters to try and master her new magical ring. Yesterday, she attempted an attack and nearly destroyed half the castle, so it's clear she could do with some practice. The maid delivers her tea right on time like normal, but this time, Irene throws the cup to the ground. Someone slipped a sleeping pill in it. She recognizes the scent from her days with Liel. She wants to go and tell Noelle at once, worried that she's in danger, but Louiel can hear someone at the door, so she picks Irene up and heads to the balcony. You know, like any normal person would do. But it turns out that Louiel was right. 3 men all in black suddenly slam open the door just before they jump. Is this some kind of assassination attempt? They run to the stables and jump on the first horse they find, speeding toward Noelle's direction. He's going to be absolutely furious when he finds out. So guys, what do you think of this story so far? Please subscribe and turn on notifications for updates on this and all our other stories, so you can be the first to find out when they're out. Thank you so much for your support. See you in the next one!